Curiosity stirred the air the moment Rowan Creed pushed open the heavy cabin door, snow sliding off his coat in a soft cascade. He had returned from gathering fallen pine branches, expecting only the quiet company of his fire and the steady rhythm of a winter morning. Instead, his gaze caught on a young woman seated at his rough-hewn kitchen table, her posture small, her breath uneven. She looked as though one harsh exhale might shatter her entirely. Mara Ellison flinched when the door clicked shut, but she did not lift her eyes. Her hands, thin, reddened from cold, were clasped tightly, as if anchoring her to the earth. Rowan did not speak at first. He simply watched, absorbing details with the wary patience of a man who had once lived too long among silence and shadows. Mara's dress was threadbare, the hem frayed from long miles. Her boots, soaked through and mottled with frost, suggested she had wandered far before stumbling into his shelter. A damp strand of hair clung to her cheek, glowing faintly in the firelight. She was young, perhaps 23, but carried the weary stillness of someone who had been taught to expect disappointment. When she finally glanced up, Rowan saw eyes swollen from tears yet still bright with a quiet, stubborn dignity. He set the firewood down carefully, as though even the sound of it dropping might wound her further. "You're safe here," he said, voice low, steady, warmed by a kind of gentleness that often surprised people who only knew him by rumor. "How did you come to my cabin?" Mara swallowed, her throat tight. I saw the light," she murmured. "The storm. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice carried the trembling edge of humiliation, as though seeking shelter were a crime. Rowan's chest tightened. He knew that tone. He had spoken with it himself years ago when the world had tried to carve him into a man made of regret. Quietly, he moved to stoke the fire, granting her a moment to gather her breath. "You're freezing," he said after a beat. "Let me warm some water. Take off your coat." She hesitated, fear flaring across her expression, but Rowan kept his movements slow, deliberate. Trust was a delicate thing. He would not rush her. When she finally shrugged out of her coat, he caught sight of bruised wrists, faint but unmistakable. He did not ask, though questions burned through him. Instead, he poured water into a tin cup and set it before her. "Drink. You've been out in the cold too long." Her hands trembled around the cup. "Thank you, Mr. Rowan," he said. Just Rowan. Silence settled between them again, soft, cautious, like deer edging toward a clearing. Wind brushed against the cabin logs, but inside, the fire crackled with a steady confidence neither of them could muster. Rowan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying her without judgment. Mara seemed to sense the weight of his gaze not as scrutiny, but as concern, and her shoulders loosened, just faintly. "I was working at the Caldwell Ranch," she said, almost whispering. "They hired me to mend linens and patch pockets. It wasn't much, but it was honest." Rowan nodded, urging her to continue with nothing more than patient stillness. "The rancher's wife accused me of stealing her brooch." Her voice broke on the last word. "I didn't. I swear I didn't. But no one believed me. They dragged me out before the sun came up. Threw my things into the dirt. Wouldn't even let me explain." Shame spilled from her like a wound reopening. Rowan felt his jaw tighten, anger flickering not from disbelief but from recognition. He too had been condemned by whispers once, when his younger brother died from a fall on their homestead cliffs and people decided Rowan must have pushed him. Grief had been too complex a story for them. Suspicion had been easier. "You did nothing wrong," Rowan said simply. The certainty in his tone made Mara blink, her lashes damp. People see what they want to see, and fear does the rest. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite name, half gratitude, half disbelief that someone might choose to stand beside her rather than above her. "I walked until I couldn't feel my feet," she said. "When I saw your cabin window glowing, I thought maybe I could rest a moment. Just until the sun rose." Her voice cracked on the word rest, and Rowan felt something shift in him, a quiet pull, deep and instinctive. "You can rest as long as you need," he murmured. "No one will turn you out here." The fire warmed the room, but the air between them held a different kind of heat, slow, cautious, earned. Mara set the cup down, her fingers relaxing. A fragile steadiness flickered through her posture, as though Rowan's calm had lent her a piece of his strength. "What will people think?" she asked suddenly. "If they find me here?" Rowan let the question settle. Outside, the storm softened, flakes drifting slower now, gentler. The cabin felt tucked away from the world, suspended in a kind of quiet mercy. "People always think," he said. "They rarely know." Her lips parted, not quite a smile, but something in the direction of hope. He stepped closer, not enough to startle her, but enough to show he was not a man who would hide behind distance when someone needed kindness. He reached for a blanket on the chair beside her and draped it over her shoulders. She startled at the touch, but did not pull away. The acceptance was small, almost imperceptible, yet it thrummed through the space like a promise. "For tonight," Rowan said softly, "let the world think what it wants. You've had enough cruelty. Rest now." Mara exhaled shakily, a sound of surrender and fragile relief. She leaned back in the chair, eyes fluttering, the fire's glow painting warmth across her face. Rowan watched her, sensing the delicate beginning of something neither of them had dared imagine, an unexpected crossing of two wandering paths. The storm outside finally eased into a gentle hush, and the cabin settled into a peaceful stillness. Though neither spoke it aloud, both felt it. This moment was only the beginning, and the road ahead, whatever shape it took, would not be walked alone. Rowan woke before dawn, sensing the cabin had shifted in a way that stole the breath from his chest. The embers glowed faintly, the air held a muted chill, and the fragile presence he had grown accustomed to was no longer near the hearth. Mara's folded blanket and rinsed cup told him she had left deliberately, carrying with her the quiet trust that had bloomed between them in the night. He stepped outside, following the small, hurried tracks trailing toward the river valley, each print speaking of fear rather than resolve. Without pausing, he saddled Ghost and rode after her, driven by a pull that surprised him with its intensity. The world was beginning to thaw, mist rising from the river like a pale veil, softening the sharpness of winter. Rowan urged Ghost down the slope, scanning the shoreline until he caught sight of her. Mara stood at the river's edge, bundle clutched to her chest, staring across the thin ice as though it were a bridge to freedom. Her posture was rigid, trembling with uncertainty, yet her eyes carried a stubborn pain he recognized. When he called her name, she startled and stepped onto the brittle ice before she realized how fragile it was. Cracks spread beneath her boots in delicate webs, and she froze, breath shallow, fear pinning her in place. Rowan dismounted and approached slowly, testing each patch before stepping. "You don't need to run," he said, voice calm despite the urgency tightening his ribs. "Come back. You're not a burden to me." Mara shook her head, tears glistening. "People will say I stayed with you because I needed protection. They'll twist your kindness. They always do." Rowan drew closer, ice groaning beneath him. "Let them talk. Their words don't decide who we are." She hesitated at that, her expression cracking with longing and doubt. When she reached toward him, a sharp fracture split the air. The ice beneath her gave way in a violent rush, and Rowan lunged, grasping her arm just as the edge crumbled into the swirling water. He dragged her onto solid ground, the two collapsing together on the snowy bank, breathless with shock and relief. Mara clung to him, trembling not from cold but from the terror of what might have been. Rowan held her with a fierce gentleness, overwhelmed by the certainty that he could not let her slip out of his life again. "I didn't want to leave," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his coat. "I just thought you deserved someone without stain." Rowan cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek with unguarded tenderness. "Your worth isn't defined by anyone's lies. Stay, if you want to." Slowly, she nodded, eyes softening in a way that filled him with quiet warmth. They walked back to the cabin side by side, each step loosening the fear that had held them apart. Inside, the fire welcomed them with renewed glow. Rowan brewed tea, and Mara wrapped herself in the blanket she had nearly abandoned, absorbing the comfort she had long been denied. The world outside seemed gentler now, as though the thaw had reached something within them both. In the days that followed, whispers in Cinder Bluff shifted. The Caldwell rancher, confronted by neighbors who suspected his deceit, confessed to the false accusation he had leveled against Mara. Her name cleared, The harsh judgment she once endured dissolved into murmurs of sympathy and indignation. Rowan stood at her side through every conversation, not as a protector but as someone who valued her truth over the noise of the town. Mara, strengthened by justice and Rowan's steady presence, began to move through the world with a quiet confidence. She mended shirts at the table, humming soft melodies she had kept hidden for years. Rowan found himself pausing to watch her, struck by the ease she brought into his once silent home. She thanked him with small gestures, a mended sleeve, a warm meal, a touch on his arm that lingered. Affection grew between them in gentle increments, each moment stitched by trust rather than haste. Winter loosened its grip, revealing blades of green pushing through thawing soil. Rowan often found Mara outside at dusk, watching the valley shift from cold to color. One evening, he joined her on the porch. The sunset cast warm gold across her face, and she slipped her hand into his with a softness that felt like a vow born from survival rather than romance rushed. Rowan closed his fingers around hers, gratitude blooming quietly in his chest. The cabin, once a refuge for a man who believed solitude was safer than hope, now felt like the beginning of something new. Mara's laughter filled the space between the walls, and Rowan's steady presence gave her a foundation she had never known. They rebuilt their lives side by side, not declaring love with grand gestures but living it in the quiet constancy of shared mornings, healed wounds, and unguarded smiles. Their ending was not dramatic, not loud, but deeply, wonderfully whole. They chose each other every day. Two souls forged in hardship, discovering peace in the warmth of a spring morning that felt like the happiest turn their lives had ever taken. And as the winds carried the scent of new blossoms across the valley, they understood that the gentlest miracles are born from courage, patience, and the bravery of choosing hope together.